What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today we've got the top 4 best Eagle Stratagems that you can use inside of Helldivers 2. Now, the Eagle Stratagem is definitely one that you want to utilize more often, especially after you've gotten the ship module for the hangar fully upgraded. It is almost going to be invaluable to use inside of pretty much every single one of your diving missions. With that being said, let's jump straight into it. Coming up at number 4, we've got the Eagle Cluster Bomb, which is going to be only useful for the terminate side of things. You would not ever want to use this. On the automaton side of things, basically 90% of the enemies are fully armored and generally will be unaffected by this cluster bomb. But when it comes to the terminate side, it is almost invaluable when it comes to crowd control. Now, not everybody needs to use this, and I wouldn't say every single team composition has to use this, but there are certain instances, especially in higher difficulties, where there are a ton of those little grasshoppers, those little flying ones that can jump straight at you, and there's just tons of those bloaty bugs. Now, both these combinations can be really frustrating in higher difficulties, especially those bloaty bugs. They seem like they can just do an instant kill if you're not just either running sideways or being able to dodge right as they're arching that neck back to pull that exorcist puke just straight at you. It's a bit of a nightmare, and what gets even worse is those bloaty bugs get harder to kill as they get those armored variants of them, the ones with the green sides, and they can be a little bit difficult to take down. But thankfully, with the cluster bomb, it is an explosive damage type, and if you didn't know this, any damage that has the explosive damage type to it is actually going to do additional damage to weak spots. That is why it ends up being able to clear out these bloaty bugs extremely efficiently, and you may have noticed in harder difficulties, there are large packs of these on top of the large packs of smaller enemies. So in certain instances, this can be extremely game-changing and life-saving for your team, and they were to be able to just call this in and with a large blast radius just clear out those massive packs of hordes of terminate that you'll be facing off with. And even at the same time, if you have one of those bug breach moments, this is something you can throw on top of there as well to really clear out a ton of those smaller bugs. Now, medium bugs will take a little bit of damage from this, but generally won't be devastated by this. And do keep in mind, this does have a large radius of effect and can be off the beaten path of wherever your beacon may have been. So do keep in mind to let your teammates know when you're throwing this and give them a visual aid of where you're throwing this, considering if you're caught in the middle of this, it can just either ragdoll you, completely eviscerate you, or just toss you off into the trees, and that impact damage can be enough to finish you off, if not being thrown back into the rest of the horde that may be behind it or off in the distance away from that explosion. It's nothing more irritating than just being bombarded and having no knowledge of the fact that your teammate just threw in a cluster bomb, and that's going to be one of your reinforcements wasted right there. But on top of that fact, the cluster bomb is also useful for the egg missions inside of the terminate side of things. If you throw this in the middle of one of those egg nests, generally 90% of those eggs can be destroyed. If not, if it's a smaller yield of eggs in that one section of the map, it can sometimes completely eviscerate all the eggs with the massive amount of explosions and the large radius that it does have. But this is an Eagle airstrike, so if there is like a mountain next to it, which generally there's like some like mountainous bug structures that are holding up these eggs, sometimes it can land on the side of that and kind of miss the target. It can be frustrating at times with the Eagle, but in the other instances, it is going to be absolutely devastating and going to clear up the inside of there, besides anything that may be a charger or a little bit less of the size of a charger, one of those medium type enemies. And on top of that, you'll get 5 uses of this, and there'll only be a 2-minute cooldown on top of that after you're done with the 5 uses, with those 8 seconds in between. So you're going to be readily available to take on a ton of those bug breaches and have massive crowd control effect with something like this stratagem. Coming up at the number 3 slot, we've got the 500 kg bomb, which some people may be displeased with, and you could just let me know about that down in the comments below. The big thing is, this is one of those stratagems that's all about the DPS, but not always is it all about the DPS. Sadly enough, this is an Eagle airstrike, and you're going to need to be quite strategic with this one, as the blast radius is large and it looks larger than what it actually is. The problem with explosives inside of this game is that they deal a somewhat realistic effect to them. At the dead center of the explosion is going to be the massive impact moment. That's where all the damage is going to be, and when you do hit with that, man, that 500 kg is definitely decimating everything that it touches within that center. But as you go in a circular radius outward from that blast, each meter that you go out, there is a bit of a damage drop off, and that's why there are certain moments where you may have had dropping in one of these 500 kg, and it seems like that Bile Titan's like right on top of that, but it doesn't one-shot him. It can be extremely frustrating. You may still have done some damage to him, but probably not enough to get even close to finishing him off, and that can be extremely frustrating. That's where I get this love-hate relationship with that 500 kg bomb, but it still does have its uses. It still can be a heavy hitter. It's still fantastic, and I would highly suggest using this on the blitz missions for the Terminid side of things, or even on the side of the automatons. It can be worthwhile in clearing out some of those hulks as they do kind of cluster together, but at the same time, there is one other stratagem that's in our rank 2 slot that can be a bit more efficient, a bit more strategic, and help out in those moments where even if you're in the midst of chaos, you can still get that effective damage in on the targets you needed to get in without putting a whole lot of effort in. Coming up at the number 2 slot, we've got the Eagle 110mm rocket pods. Now, this is something that I feel like a lot of people just either don't know about or don't know how effective it can be, or they've just been looking over it. Considering, I'll tell you right now, it definitely doesn't look like it's doing all of that, and from the video footage that they showcase this with, it seems like something that's meant for crowd control, when it's not. It does have a little bit of the capability of dealing a little bit of crowd control, but the big thing about this is the fact that as soon as you throw this beacon out, it just has to be in the general vicinity of a large target, and then the Eagle will seek out within almost like a 10, if not more, meter radius around that beacon and find whatever the largest target is next to that, and does massive damage to that target. So with this, even in the midst of chaos, you can just throw this out towards whatever singular target you need this to strike, and it will deal some massive damage to it. This is going to include things like that cannon turret over on the automaton side of things. You may have used the 500 kg at the base of one of those towers before with that cannon that can just one-shot you from what seems like miles away. Extremely frustrating. I cannot tell you how many times that thing has blasted me from halfway across the map. It is absurd sometimes. But if you throw in a 500 kg like I have before, and then you thought to yourself, well, that should have enough blast radius to blow up that cannon turret. No, it sadly enough doesn't. It's far enough away to end up not even almost seeming like it does any damage to it. But with the rocket pods, all you have to do is, even from cover, just throw this somewhere near that tower, and it will one-shot that turret cannon. That is almost invaluable, and you'll have 3 uses of this. It will also one-shot chargers. It will also have the capability of one-shotting hulks. The problem with the rocket pods is there are instances where this is still an Eagle stratagem. It's still an aircraft coming in from a certain angle, and if something's moving, not always will all 4 of those rocket pods hit, and the specific thing with the Hulk is it will need to hit it in the back towards that weak spot. It will still deal devastating damage to that Hulk, but you may have to finish it off with an additional 1 railgun shot, or possibly just tossing a grenade or putting a few shots into the back of it. But if not, you're readily available with another one of those uses of the rocket pods just after that, and generally, a lot of times you will see that most of these Hulks will be traveling in groups, so sometimes you may just hit a couple of the enemies around them at the same time. But at that same instance, it will 100% of the time one-shot those tanks. Like, the tanks move so slow that it is almost impossible for all 4 of those rocket pods not to hit that tank, even the heavily armored tank, and it will one-shot those, so you can just easily toss that from cover and be able to just nail that without any issues, and then be able to move around to take out the rest of the enemies. On top of that, when it comes to Bile Titans, this is almost invaluable. In those moments when you miss with the 500 kg, there's nothing worse than that, because considering if you don't have the ship module upgrades, you don't have another use to that, you don't have another chance, and then you're stuck on either the option of going for rearmament, having to wait 2 to 3 minutes for that cooldown, and then the possibility if you have 2, Eagle Stratagems, it would be even worse, considering that may be one of your few options that you had in order to deal with a Bile Titan. But with the rocket pods, you kind of alleviate some of those moments. It may not one-shot them, but with the rocket pods, it's guaranteed to hit, and if you get 2 of them with all 4 rockets landing each time, one of the best moments to get this done is when you see them actually go for the vomiting factor. If you're kiting them, just throw it down at your feet as they're following you. They'll get to that point where they'll stand still and they'll take all 4 of those rocket pods, and in just 2 uses you can take out a Bile Titan and Helldive. It can be extremely life-saving, and you may think to yourself, well, it only takes 1 500 kg, but the simple fact is, even if you only get 1 of these rocket pods in, one thing to also mention is that the orbital rail cannon strike at the Helldiver difficulty will not one-shot the Bile Titan unless it perfectly lands on the head. If it lands on the body, it's going to be a 2-shotter. So in certain moments where, say, you have a teammate that has the rail cannon, you have the rocket pods, you can use both of yours to take down that Bile Titan really quickly. Or it's one of those moments where you can effectively take down half the health bar of that Bile Titan with just 1 rocket pod. And then if you've got a buddy with a railgun on your team or any other stratagems that may be dealing damage towards that Bile Titan, you'll have not only opened up a weak spot for your teammates to be hitting on that Bile Titan to deal damage, but at the same time, it'll effectively give that person with that railgun an even higher chance of just finishing off that Bile Titan as quickly as possible. It's just going to be one of those team effort moments that you're having more effectiveness at dealing that damage and dealing with that threat in a more efficient manner than you would possibly with the 500 kg. Because with the 500 kg, if you're stuck in one of those chaotic moments and you can't strategically land that directly where it's going to come in at the moment where it's just below or just on top of wherever that single target is that you need to take out, it can be devastating. And on top of that, when it comes to the rocket pods, they will also seek out the automaton fabricators. So if you're on a blitz mission for the automaton side of things, this is fantastic for those moments when you just need to run by one of those little base locations. Throw this in for especially the small ones where there's only 1 fabricator. You can literally just toss this over near it. It'll immediately just one-shot it, and then you can keep trucking. Even if there's a flare going off, you won't be around for all those bot traps. You can just keep moving on to the next base and be able to just toss in another couple of these. And since we've got 3 uses and then it's only going to be 2 minutes before you have another 3, arguably, you know, if you're at Helldive difficulty, I believe it's 9 or 10 that you'll need to take out within the first 5 minutes. I mean, you've already taken out more than half that needed to be done by just tossing these, and there's no problem whatsoever. And if you're working with something like the Eagle airstrike on top of that, I mean, you by yourself have every capability with all the ordnance you have to completely eliminate all of the targets needed, whereas the other 3 teammates that you have can effectively put in anything that's just on guard or just decimating all the enemies that you have in front of you. It's a devastating force. It's one that I don't think a lot of people understand fully or have just looked over, but it is one that I would consider a top tier for the Eagle Stratagems and a top tier stratagem overall, considering it is just a 2-minute cooldown. It heat seeks or it homes into whatever that largest target is, and it creates the capability of having one of the most minimal, besides the rail cannon strike, possibilities of friendly fire at the same time. It still can have friendly fire if, you know, obviously your teammate's getting rushed by one of those chargers or anything along those lines, but it is life-saving in a lot of instances. And with the moment with the charger, if you've got one chasing you, you can just throw it at your feet, go and dive to the left or the right to get him to do that spin around move, and then boom, instantly one-shot him. It's no problem at all right there. It can be ultimately life-saving, and there's been moments when I've been in Helldive difficulty where there's multiple chargers chasing me, where it does even have splash damage, and I'm blowing off the armor, the other one's dealing damage to multiple chargers, on top of also devastating that first one that it initially targeted. Coming up at our number 1 slot is going to be the Eagle Airstrike. Now, the Eagle Airstrike is just at the number 1 because it is arguably one of the most well-rounded, most versatile type of stratagems you can use inside of pretty much every stratagem. I don't know if I'd arguably put this as like the number 1 stratagem, but it is probably the number 1 that I've used throughout the entirety of my playthrough of Helldivers 2. as it's just so versatile. It has the capability of basically dealing damage to just about everything in the game, and at the same time creating crowd control effect, creating the capability of pushing into strategic positions, giving you the capability of clearing out sites that you'll be moving along for main objectives for each dive that you've taken, for each mission that you're going on. It is just invaluable, and the amount of damage that it deals is extremely effective. It can be taking out one charger, if not multiple chargers, in just one strike. It is dependent on the RNG, but at the same time, it just has such a massive blast radius and such a large amount of damage to it that just puts it at the top of the Eagle stratagems, and an absolute S tier stratagem overall. Now, it doesn't do the best damage towards something like the Bile Titan, but it can break off the armor for the Bile Titan and deal a little bit of damage. It really is all about the fact of needing one of those bombs to just barrage on top of the actual Bile Titan, because not always is it going to make that contact. That is the part of the RNG moment, and lining this up can be a bit difficult at times, but overall, 90% of the time, this is going to do exactly what you needed to do, and that is clear out a massive amount of enemies that may be in front of you from small to large. It's going to be dealing damage across the board, and even if it doesn't finish something off, it's going to leave them missing a large portion of their health. It is just fantastic in so many different situations. It is very versatile. It has so many different uses and such a low cooldown. You cannot go wrong with the Eagle Airstrike on any loadout that you're using. It's a fantastic one, and I'll make a strong argument that it sits there up at the top. But do keep in mind, it can be heavy on the friendly fire, so do let your teammates know that you're throwing this in, and do try to throw it a little bit of a ways away from them. There has been several times where I've thought to myself, maybe that's a little bit danger close, and it was a little too close. Sometimes it's not going to land directly in line with where your beacon is, so be careful about it. But thankfully, even if it does destroy them, it more than likely will destroy and eviscerate everything that was around them that may have ended up killing them anyways. You know, sometimes your teammates put themselves into a pickle, and it may say that you finished them off, but they would have been dead either way if you hadn't done it. We'll just make that argument. Now, when it comes to honorable mentions, the Eagle Smoke Strike is what comes to mind. It is something that can be valuable on the automaton side of things, as it can provide a little bit of cover for the movement of repositioning. This is something that will disable the capability of each one of these automatons having that perfect aimbot moment, especially the Gatling turret ones. There is nothing more frustrating than just being beamed by one of those and just immediately eviscerated, especially if you're behind some very small cover that you're just stuck in one position. You throw one of these over, you'll basically stop them from having that capability of just homing in on you, and they will still be capable of shooting through it, so do be aware of that, but it can be something that can be life-saving in certain instances. It's just not something I would say is a guaranteed survivability, but it is fantastic for repositioning, something that would work fantastic in some team compositions if you knew how to utilize it right, but it's not always going to be perfect. And I will say, if you are using smokes at all compared to, like, you know, the grenade or the orbital version, this is arguably going to be your best route to use smokes, considering you get 3 uses out of this. I think it's almost 2 minutes on the cooldown for the orbital smoke strike, and with this, in 2 minutes you've got 3 uses of it, and it's much larger radius than that of something like the smoke grenade itself as well. The 2 Eagle stratagems I would say just try to avoid using are going to be the Eagle Strafing Run. Now, the Eagle Strafing Run has a little bit of a use to it, but I feel as you get into the harder difficulties, it really dwindles in its capabilities. It can be used for some crowd control against smaller enemies, but it's not explosive damage dealt. It's just it's almost like a higher caliber round just speeding straight in front of you. I will say it's very speedy. You could throw it directly at your feet, and almost instantly this strafing run will go straight in front of you. And it can be a bit easier to control as compared to a lot of the other stratagems for a little bit of crowd control, but it just seems to be one of those that I would just not slot in. It won't be as useful as some of the other stratagems that we have in the full list of everything available. And the other one would be the Eagle Napalm Strike, which, man, I'm real sad about this one, because this is another one that I picked up pretty early on thinking, man, this is going to be a good time. I heard "Gimme Shelter" in the background, and I thought it was going to be a real nice day. But sadly enough, it's just not dealing as much damage. It does have a similar effect to the Eagle airstrike when it lands, but it's not as effective with the explosive damage. And trust me, the fire damage is it's just not enough. It's not dealing as much as I'd like it to be. The bugs aren't going to stick around inside of that fire. One thing that would be kind of cool is if it actually caused the bugs to move around the fire and basically displace them. I'd really like if that was the actual effect of this, but it doesn't. They just walk straight through, even the smaller bugs do, and they don't end up dying to it. I would like to see this be something that would be buffed in the future, but even up to Helldive difficulty, this just has, even in lower difficulties, this was just not enough damage to be effective or even great at crowd control. I was very disappointed in it. It looks cool. I love it. I love the look of it. I think they nailed that, but when it comes down to its effectiveness, it just really isn't there. But that's going to be it right there, guys. That's going to be the top 4 best Eagle stratagems you can utilize. I mean, Eagle stratagems are almost unmatched in my opinion, but I will make a strong statement that you don't want to just fully stack out with the Eagle stratagems, even though they've got that really low cooldown and multiple uses to them. There are other stratagems that are also just as useful that even though they have a larger cooldown, can be invaluable to some of your loadouts and team compositions out there. Really work around what your teammates have and try to synergize with what they have capable to them. But generally, I'd say a good rule of thumb is having 1 or 2 Eagles or Eagle stratagems within your loadout, especially just one. Having one of each one of the different types of stratagems is a really good, I guess, macro that you could have to find the best slotted combinations to just get the best out of each one of different types of the stratagems themselves. But that's topic for a different video in the future. But if you'd like to see more of this content in the future, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more coming up. And at the same time, if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description. Follow me over at Twitch. I'll be streaming daily. And on that note, have a good one.